We'll take a look at some ways to transform your backyard into a beautiful garden home. Some great ideas coming up next. Over the past 20 years as a garden designer, I've enjoyed helping homeowners create private sanctuaries full of beauty and wonder. I find each garden to be a fresh opportunity to explore ways to create uniquely personal spaces. These are just a few of the gardens I've helped transform into garden homes. Hi, I'm Alan Smith. Welcome to the Garden Home, where you'll find practical ideas, beautiful landscapes, and much, much more to help inspire you to push the boundaries of your home right out into the garden, to the edges of your property. Now, in today's show, we're going to focus on a few elements of design, principally color, focal point, and the shape and form of plants. That's why I'm in this garden center. These design principles are a part of my 12 principles of design that I use when I'm putting together a garden home. What I mean by garden home is just a garden that's truly an extension of your home, and a garden that allows you to bring the beauty and bounty indoors. When it comes to classic gardens, England is my training ground. I studied great gardens here, and one of the grandest is Chatsworth. It was an honor recently to visit this garden as a gardener and journalist. I spoke with the Duchess of Devonshire in her private garden, where we exchanged ideas about some of our favorite color combinations, such as blues and grays, as well as our love of raising poultry. We also talked about the new craze for ornamental grasses sweeping Europe and America. Well, Your Grace, I see you even have hollyhocks growing here in the borders.
Oh, hollyhocks, my very favorite, love them. But the ones I like best of all are the ones that are nearly black, don't you?
Oh, I love those, the big single blossoms.
Yeah.
And they are almost black.
They're as near black as you can get in a flower, I guess.
Now, that's a beautiful white one. Yeah.
Well, my mother used to say she hated white flowers. She said they were like bits of paper blowing about.
I see. Well, it was, I guess it wasn't fashionable then to have white flowers in the garden.
Well, she was a law unto herself. She didn't go for fashion.
I see, right.
She just would have.
Didn't like them.
But now this is what you were talking about, these pale blue greys.
Yes, these wonderful color. This is sea holly. And the nice gray foliage, and then that sort of metallic blue is fantastic.
Even the stalk is metallic, isn't it?
It is. Look at that.
Beautiful.
Sensational.
They're really beautiful.
And you've mixed a lot of annuals in with the perennials.
Well,
that's very nice.
That's what you could call a stopgap. Right. This is new, you see, so the perennials haven't got very big.
Sure.
And the annuals are they're a stopgap.
Well, it's a trick I used in my garden as well. Until the perennials matured and the roses, I filled in with lots of annuals.
And then do the chickens get in?
The bantams, they do. They run through the flowers and don't seem to bother things.
They don't scratch it?
Not really. I think the larger hens would, but bantams don't, so I allow them to run in the garden.
I'd love to see your bantams.
Well, they're a lot of fun, as you know.
I do.
Now, you've integrated roses in this border as well.
Yes, I rather like roses in borders, do you?
Absolutely. I think a mixed border is easier to care for, and you can create a more attractive result quicker by using them. Seeing grasses coming into favor is a good thing. I mean,
But you're more for a change, aren't you, to something different to the usual.
Absolutely.
Bedding out or whatever it is.
I find that a lot of people are experimenting with them because no one quite knows how to use them yet.
Yeah, I think you're right.
They're so new on the scene.
Yeah, no, you're right. But don't you think that maybe a rock background, it's either got to be ferns or that. It's no good trying to have flowers unless it's something that seeds itself like a foxglove.
No, I think it sort of captures the ethos of that plant to incorporate them with natural objects like
I think so. And the dim colours are good of grass, don't you think?
They are.
Very dim looking.
I know exactly what the Duchess means. When I began designing gardens, I have to admit that grasses weren't the first plants to come to my mind. But once you get into them, you soon realize that there's so many to choose from, and they will perform in such a wide variety of growing conditions. What's interesting about ornamental grasses is their popularity actually began in Europe. Soon after my visit with the Duchess, I met Hank Goyers in Holland. Hank is a nurseryman who has an amazing personal garden and a passion for grasses. His garden is almost a park for his neighborhood. Hank took me on a tour and showed me how he's using ornamental grasses in some effective ways. I think one of the biggest trends in gardening has been the embrace of grasses and the use of them in gardens.
Yes, these plants are getting more and more popular, especially here in Europe. Especially the English people like them very, very much.
Yes, and we're seeing an increase in the use of them in America as well.
I think it's a nice plant because it is even nice when it's getting dormant. Even in October, November, it's still very nice.
Yes, as it goes to sleep, its form is still there. They're even nice in the winter with snow on them.
With snow on it, yeah.
Yeah. How many different varieties of grasses do you grow in your nursery, Hank?
We grow about 25 different varieties, but because it's getting more and more popular, we are expanding our range.
Have you developed some favorites over the years?
It depends on in which place you want to put them in the garden, because grasses are very nice a certain period of the year in combinations with all kinds of flowers. And because of the combinations even later in the year, I like them so very much.
Yeah. I mean, they're great with things like asters, which also bloom late in the year. So you can get the plumes of the grasses with the beautiful flowers of the Michaelmas daisies and wild asters.
I think it's really the combinations of the different flowers and the different grasses. You have variegated ones and you have the green ones, you even have the blue ones, and it's always the combinations which are very important.
Yeah, I like the way you've planted this Calamagrostis Carl Forrester back here with the Monarda. What are some of the other grasses you grow? I see one beyond there that looks like a miscanthus.
That is a miscanthus variegatus, which reflects in the sunlight.
Yeah.
It's marvelous.
Beautiful. One of the combinations I've noticed in your garden is the panicum, I think, with the purple coneflower.
Yes. It's again the combination. When you walk by it and you see the color and the rest of the grass, it's again the combination which is so beautiful.
Yeah, as well as the texture. I think what I've come to appreciate the most about ornamental grasses is that their shape and forms can actually affect the feeling or mood of a garden. You see, grasses provide movement in a space. They also provide an ethereal quality. Because they're vertical and fountain-esque, they also lend a certain degree of exuberance. Even in fall and winter, these plants have a strong presence in the garden. Just take a look at this switchgrass, one called Panicum heavy metal in my garden. It's beautiful contrasted with this purple smoke tree. Now there are other plants, such as shrubs, that can give that same fountain-esque look in the garden, such as winter honeysuckle, spirea, and forsythia. Now this idea of fountain-shaped plants is just one category. There's several others that I want to explore with you, such as columnar. Some of my favorites are Italian cypress, columnar hornbeam, and these columnar English oak that line the periphery of my garden. Now columnar is easy to remember because it's in the form of a column. I think the shapes of plants evoke certain personalities. For instance, round and mound-shaped plants are sort of jolly and fun, like these boxwood or this globe-shaped arborvitae. I used boxwoods to punctuate the entries in my garden. Climbing plants, on the other hand, evoke a certain romantic, wild, and unpredictable look. Climbing roses give an arbor a look of instant age and can certainly add a touch of romance to a property. Now these are just a few examples of the shapes and forms of plants we can find for our gardens. I don't want to inundate you with all of the various categories. I think you get the point. Now if we could learn to look at plants, the overall shape of them, the way a child does, it would carry us a long way to making the right selection of plants for our gardens. When a child looks at a tree, they'll often draw a lollipop. They're not focused on the details. It's the overall shape. Now, shape and form can also imply a certain period or age. For instance, I've been working on a project around a Victorian house. It was built around 1870. Now, what I've done is used some weeping trees because the Victorians loved anything weeping. They were so unique to them. They loved weeping Japanese maples, weeping willows, mulberries, and cherries. That's why I just had to use a weeping cherry in front of the house. Now in the back, I've also used a few weeping trees. I have this weeping blue Atlantic cedar along with a mulberry. You see, what I wanted to achieve in this space was to honor the historical significance of the property, but at the same time create a garden for modern living. There's just something about weeping plants that seems relaxed and comfortable, almost like flowing or cascading water. Now let's talk about another design element, and that's focal point. When creating memorable garden rooms, a focal point serves as a visual hook, a place that catches and holds our interest, making it one of the most powerful elements in the garden. You see, focal points can be simple and ordinary objects, just as a bench or a container of flowers can draw the eye. Or a focal point can be a shocking hue that attracts the viewer's attention, screaming, "Hey, look at me!" You see, focal points draw our eye. They don't dominate an area, but they radiate a certain energy that somehow connects different parts of the garden in some way. So often when we begin the design process, selecting just the right focal point for the garden can be puzzling, if not absolutely overwhelming. So I thought it might be helpful to go through some categories of possible focal points for the garden that might inspire you. Now, the first one that comes to mind is, of course, sculpture. Whether abstract or realistic, it can grab the eye when placed in the garden. Now, you'll want to keep scale in mind. A small garden will look silly with a sculpture this size in it, but it fits perfectly in the gardens of Chatsworth. Benches or other garden seats can help anchor a space, inviting us to slow down and linger in the garden. Buildings, like my tool shed or this whimsical temple or tea house, can serve as a focal point. Architecture in the garden helps to distinguish the cultivated from the wild. And don't forget about windows. In the garden, they can offer glimpses of what's beyond, as well as bring light into garden rooms, just as they do in our homes. And this reminds me of borrowed views, because they can be some of the nicest focal points. Take these church spires as seen walking through a garden in Charleston, South Carolina. And then there are plants. When clustered together or planted individually, they can visually anchor an area or serve as garden sculpture. And of course, we can't forget about containers. They can make wonderful focal points. Now here's a container that I created that you can put together to serve as a focal point in your garden. It follows my simple container recipe. A tall and spiky element, something round and full in the middle, and to finish it off, something cascading to spill over the edge. For the tall and spiky plant in this composition, I've chosen a Dracaena, or sometimes called a spike. Now for the round and full, I'm including these caladiums. Now let's go back just a moment and revisit this idea of shape and form. Look at how these two plants contrast one another. When you put two different forms like this together, one that's tall and spiky and grass-like and the other bold and round, you really create some nice contrast. Now to finish off the round and full or the middle plants in this composition, I've added the colorful New Guinea impatiens. This one's called Sonic Light Pink. And I've also added Gara. This variety is called Siskiyou Pink. Cascading out of the container is a house plant that I commonly use in arrangements. It's called asparagus fern. To accent the main container, I've added a small dish of impatiens and a medium-sized container of asparagus fern. These complementary containers echo some of the same elements we find in the larger combo, and it makes the entire composition look full and robust. Wouldn't it make a beautiful focal point on a patio or deck? One of the best ways to learn about garden design is to visit and see the works of others. When I travel, I particularly like to see the personal gardens of garden designers and to see how they've applied the 12 principles of design in their own work. In Holland, I had an opportunity to visit with George and Marian Hagerverst. Marian is a well-respected garden designer, And George, her husband, has worked in the bulb industry for years. Marion is a little shy and modest about her work, but George is happy to show it off. George, how long have you had a garden here?
We live here for 24 years, and we started it when we built this house. We started the garden as well. We had to because this field was used for the house, so we had to do something with the ground surrounding the house.
So it was just a flat plane, a blank slate. So George, how did you all come up with the design of this garden?
Marianne is the designer of the garden, but we had to start with edges around to take the wind from the garden.
It must be very difficult gardening here because of your proximity to the sea.
Yeah, we live about a mile from the North Sea, and all the winds come over the sea and take the salt air with it, and it's very, very difficult. But
I see. Now, Marion, she's a trained garden designer.
Yes, she had education when we came to live here. She started education for 4 years, and during that period she started already with the garden, and we changed that later on because when you start...
Well, sure, always changing.
Yes, yeah, and you do a lot of things wrong.
Well, it's really beautiful, George, and I particularly like this color scheme that you all have used here in this space.
Thank you. Marianne, in the last autumn, she replanted all the plants, and we put some more hedges of Santolina.
Oh, it's really nice. The gray really pops and stands out.
Yes, I like it very much, and it smells so good, the Santolina.
Well, it's really its own little garden room.
Yes, it is, yes.
George, I like the 4 trees that you've used to anchor the center of this garden, and it doesn't look like they cause much of a problem with shade, too much shading.
We cut them all, of course, to keep them in shape, but and give a little height to these borders.
Yes. Well, you've used trees very effectively all through this garden, with hedges and with pleached stretches of trees.
Yes, and also in the front of the garden, because we live to a quite busy road, and it gives a lot of private feeling when the side is blocked.
Yes. Yeah, the garden does feel very private all the way around.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, it's nice. I think one of the nicest aspects of this garden that helps also create interest is the garden ornament that is placed around. I mean, some things are very ordinary, like stacked clay pots and this growing collection of watering cans that you and Marion have.
Yeah, it will stop growing now because we decided to buy no more water cans.
Too many.
Because we have about 100 in the garden and it's getting too many. But we like to visit markets in, or whatever, England, Belgium, north of France, and walk around and see what we like to put in our garden. We're always looking for things in our garden.
Right.
Never in the house, always in the garden.
For the garden. I thought it was interesting what George said about working around those sea winds. It seems every garden has its own challenges that you have to work around. Some have too much shade or too much sun. Others are too wet or dry. And some, like mine, have heavy clay soil to work through. But thankfully, plant breeders are hard at work trying to develop plants that will perform in even the most challenging conditions. At Sierra Azul Nursery in California, Jeff Rosendale tells us about meeting the challenges of gardening in dry conditions with drought-tolerant plants.
What we're trying to do is combine plants that do well in what we call a dry garden setting where we only water once a month, and combine different colors and textures and forms to create a real pleasing look of kind of a tapestry of plant forms.
Now, Jeff, this looks like Rosa mutabilis, the butterfly rose, but it's much pinker than the one I grow.
This is a sport of the Rosa chinensis mutabilis. This is called Mateo silk butterfly. The shrub roses do really well here. They tend to be a lot more disease resistant, and of course they're very drought tolerant also.
I think roses are much tougher than people think they are or give them credit for being.
Oh, I believe that.
Now, it looks like you've got gaura growing around here, which I love because it's so loose and ethereal.
Right, gaura from the southwest is a very tough garden plant, very drought resistant. What I like about the gaura, in conjunction with what you said with the loose feel, is that it has almost a wand-like, grass-like flair to it, the way it moves in the breeze. I'm really fond of the pink form of this plant. The sea hollies are really tough and really drought tolerant, And I know you know they make great cut flowers.
They do indeed. I grow this one in my garden, but I have to say that the blue that I get with mine isn't as intense as yours.
I would be happy if this plant reseeded in just about every bed in the garden. That would not disappoint me. I just love the color. It's a great plant.
Yeah, and it just works so well in contrast with the grasses and the gaura. And of course, here's the pink you were talking about, the pink gaura.
There's the
here.
pink mixed in with the white, and I really love the dark pink, and I think it looks really good with this blue of the Eryngium.
These display gardens really do give you ideas for plant combinations.
Right. Well, I would think that this is a little more what you would see in England with some of the English borders when you have the mixed perennial borders. A lot of things growing in a myriad together, a lot of complementary colors and textures together in a kind of a tapestry form.
Clearly you can see you've got a passion for plants just walking through the nursery.
Right, and I think that's probably going to continue.
Well, good. Jeff, thank you for a wonderful tour. It's been a real pleasure.
My pleasure, Alan. Come back anytime.
Well, I'll be back. I can't wait to see the new improvements.
I'll look forward to seeing you.
Thanks. Wow, can you believe you can get that much beautiful color from a garden that receives so little rain? Color is such an important element in the garden, but I think sometimes gardeners are challenged when it comes to using color effectively. Why is that? I guess it's because color is subjective. It really depends on where you're from, your cultural experience, the context in which it's seen, and most certainly the light. Without light, there is no color. Now, if you don't think color is subjective, just ask 3 friends to describe the color of a room, and you'll get 3 different answers. As a self-taught artist, I've certainly had my share of bad paintings, but you know, those paintings have been the greatest teachers. They've taught me to be generous with color, and I've taken this from the canvas and applied it to my garden designs. You see, if you're spotty with color, it just looks like confetti on a canvas. The same is true in a garden. If you'll paint with plants using a wide brush, the effect will be more dramatic. Keep in mind that there are 3 general types of colors in the garden. Cool colors like blues and purples evoke a restful feeling and can make a garden look more expansive. You can remember this because blue is the color of the sky. The second group is hot colors, like orange, red, and magenta. These make you feel energized. Think of hot red peppers to remember this group. Just as blue makes an area feel larger, hot colors make an area feel smaller. The last group is neutrals. Grays, greens, and whites. Neutrals get along with all the color families. Evergreen hedges are the perfect backdrop to plants from hot or cool color palettes. It's this green framework that holds the garden together. But just because it's green or neutral doesn't mean you can't have some fun with it. Let's go back to this idea of shape and form for just a moment. You can take green and really add a little zip to the garden. Think about all the whimsical topiary out there. Somebody has a sense of humor. To accent the entry from my rondelle garden into the fountain garden, I've scalloped the clipped boxwoods. Let me show you how I did it. First of all, I drew a template and cut it out. I suggest using building materials such as plywood or masonite. This will allow me to use it over and over as long as I want to keep the shrub trimmed in this shape. I place the template against the hedge and shear it to fit the template. It's that simple. Another great thing about this template idea is that I can flip it over to the boxwoods on the other side and create a mirror image. So let's recap what we've seen in today's show. We visited Chatsworth in England and met the Duchess of Devonshire. She shared her private garden and introduced us to the idea of using ornamental grasses in our gardens. A nurseryman in Holland further illustrated the use of ornamental grasses in a tour of his garden, and we learned about the shape and form of plants and how they can impact a garden space. Okay, it's pop quiz time. What is the shape and form of this plant? Well, do you give up? If you guessed columnar, then you're right. Elaborating on this idea of shape and form, I showed you how to create a scalloped hedge in your garden. During this show, we also looked at focal points. Remember, anything can be a focal point, from a statue, a garden bench, even a container. Next, we went through the garden of a Dutch designer and learned that the plants chosen for this garden have to be able to withstand the harsh sea winds. Which brought us to Sierra Azul in California, where we saw drought-tolerant plants being grown in display gardens, providing gardeners with great ideas on plants that can take hot, dry summers. As you can see, we've covered a lot of ground today. I hope you can take some of the ideas that we've covered and apply them to your own garden home, and at the same time, have a little fun. From the Garden Home, I'm Alan Smith. More information about today's topic and other topics covered in this series can be found at pallansmith.com.
On an upcoming episode of P. Alan Smith's Garden Home.
Hi, I'm Alan Smith. You're invited to a garden party because when warmer weather rolls around, who can resist being outdoors? Join me as we push the boundaries of the home out into the garden to extend our living space for outdoor entertaining, and look at how to take advantage of the season's bounty.